So about a week ago, Albert Rosales contacted me and said that he wanted me to check out this case that he had received from Robert Young at Mufon. He said it happened in England, but he wasn't specific on where it happened, just that it happened in England. It was fairly recent, and it's very strange. And it's kind of a throwback to the older cases where these beings would offer words of warning to witnesses.
It was September 24th, 2024. John Taylor, a pseudonym, had driven to his local county park with his dog. He had purposely arrived late in hopes that nobody else would be there, and he would be allowed to let the dog run off leash. He arrived at about 8 p.m. and parked outside the gates as they closed them off to vehicles beginning at around 9 p.m. He walked through the pedestrian gate and noticed that there were a few cars in the car park, 3 in fact, and one was about to leave. He walked up the path to the visitor center where the path split into 2 directions, left and right. He opted for the path on his left, per his routine. This led up to the hill where, at the top, it offered a great view of the surrounding valley. It was around dusk, not completely dark but getting there. He walked his dog to the top of the hill, to his usual observation point, then around to the west where the path led to a series of benches with equally good vantage points. He did not see anyone around, not on the path leading up nor anywhere else, and he felt comfortable letting his dog off his leash. He took a seat on his usual bench and watched as his dog ran about excitedly, as it tended to do. Normally Taylor would sit on the bench for around 20 minutes and then move to another spot to let the dog explore another area of the park. Though that night it was raining, and from where he was sitting he had a great view of the lightning storm off in the distance. It was fascinating to him and he decided to stay and watch it. After sitting there for, he guessed, 5 extra minutes, he suddenly heard someone else on the path approaching. Taylor, always looking to be social, said to the fellow, "Great view of the storm from here." The man said nothing. To Taylor, this man was quite tall and wore, from what he could tell, a long raincoat or trench coat. He appeared to be wearing some kind of hood or something on his head. He sat down next to Taylor and acknowledged him with a nod. Taylor attempted again to make small talk, repeating, "Great storm." And this is when things got really weird. As soon as he said those words, Taylor was hit with an overwhelming feeling of dread. This sensation came over him in an instant. He wanted to call his dog over for protection, get up and leave, but he could not. In fact, he couldn't do anything. He couldn't speak, he couldn't move, he could not do anything. Taylor claims that he, quote, felt like lead. He thought he was having a stroke and wanted to gesture to the man for help, but he couldn't. Taylor had suffered from migraines for most of his life and started to get similar light sensations in his head, and as quick as it came, it was gone. The sense of dread he felt was replaced with an immediate sense of calmness, a feeling of zen, like someone had flipped an emotional switch. Taylor still couldn't speak, but he heard a voice say, "You are okay." This voice was very clear. It was not being spoken out loud, but rather it was in his head. He could tell that it was coming from the stranger. The stranger added that Taylor, quote, was right, and that he was, quote, right to be scared. He then said to him, quote, "You will know what to do with the information that I am giving you." The man proceeded to tell Taylor that he would be okay for now, but that he should, quote, prepare. Taylor could not speak out loud, but in his mind he swore at the man, asking him who he was, and, quote, "What is happening to me in my head?" The stranger simply replied, "It is of no consequence now, but it will be tomorrow." He then stood up and started to walk off, where he was joined by 2 other men that Taylor had not noticed before. He had not seen them coming up the path. It was just like they were suddenly there. At that point, Taylor got all of his faculties back, and he began to cry. As tears streamed down his face, he shouted out to the man, "What have you done to me? Help me." The three men ignored him and carried on walking down the hill. Taylor called for his dog. He was surprised to find that the dog was laying quietly behind the bench. They were both soaked from the rain. Taylor got up and he and his dog started to walk in the same direction. He could not see the men in the dark. As he walked out, Taylor thought about notifying the police or seeking medical advice, but he feared that they either would not believe him or they would deem him mad and have him committed. He elected to remain quiet about the matter. Since the encounter, Taylor has experienced the same feeling of dread on several occasions. He claims that during these moments, his mind is suddenly flooded with images that he does not understand. Typically, they would be accompanied by words that he had not thought about before and that meant nothing to him. Words like ceramic, tungsten, followed by the word failure over and over again. Further, from what he can tell, 2027 seems to be a year of great significance. Why, he does not know. Taylor senses that the images he is being shown are important for some reason. Taylor's encounter almost plays like a riddle. The stranger seems to be warning him about something terrible to come. But is it specific to Taylor, or is it some wider event that will affect the whole of the world? Nothing is clarified, possibly deliberately. Mufon UK director Robert Young personally revealed this case to Albert Rosales. I asked Albert if Taylor ever elaborated on the images he was being shown to Young, as they might provide a clue to this apparent future event, though Albert claims that the only information he had was what was told to him. These entities, whatever they are, revealed themselves to Taylor long enough to give him word of warning. But why? Of all the people in the world, why was Taylor the one given the warning? Does this suggest that Taylor has some greater role to play in the future? Or was Taylor merely a conduit, a way for the entities to get their message out to a wider audience? By reaching out to Mufon, Taylor certainly has done that. Granted, if that was their intent, then why not just cut out the middleman altogether and reveal it to Robert Young directly? Maybe the reason Taylor isn't revealing the images shown to him is because they are far too personal, and this terrible event to come is specific only to Taylor. What to make of these odd words? Ceramic, tungsten, failure? According to Taylor, these words really mean nothing to him in the present, but in some future period, he senses they will hold a greater importance. For me, this is just one of those weird cases where some beings from who knows where appear, offer words of warning, and then tinker off back into the darkness. And we're left to wonder what any of it means. As with anything in the paranormal, there are no easy answers. On the evening of May 7, 1909, Egerton S. Free watched as a long sausage-shaped object flew over his home in Clacton-on-Sea in Essex, in England. It was about 20 meters above the ground and moving very fast. He could make out that it had two bright lights. He watched the craft until it disappeared from view, melding into the darkness of the night. She immediately notified her husband, who also came out to inspect it. By Egerton's description, in the simplest terms, it looked like a spherical object with a long steel bar running through it. Word of the peculiar discovery got around quickly, and within a week, police and members of the local Coast Guard had arrived on his property and examined the object. They had no idea what it was. They asked Egerton to lock it away in his safe until they could get someone from the British military to come out and study it. About 2 weeks later, the British military did indeed take possession of the object, and later on claimed that it was a sea buoy used for naval target practice. They offered no explanation on how the sea buoy wound up atop the cliffs on Clacton. Around this time, a newspaper man visited Egerton at his home and interviewed him for an article that was printed in the East Anglian Daily Times on May 18, 1909. Another newspaper, the Northern Daily Mail, also printed about the case on May 18, 1909. And it got even weirder. While they were there, the neighbor's live-in servant had stepped outside to go to church. She claims the men approached her slowly, one on each side. One of them spoke to her in a, quote, strange voice, in a language she did not understand. Something about these two men terrified her. She was so frightened, in fact, that she rushed back into the house and did not venture back outside until the next day. Let me say this again. This is from a 1909 newspaper article. Reading it now in hindsight, it lines up so perfectly with our more modern Men in Black reports. The fact that they arrived on the scene before anyone was alerted to the downed object, the strange voice, and the sense of fear described by the witness in their presence. This is essentially an MIB report published 40 years before the idea of the Men in Black was even a thing. How does one even begin to explain this?